Good morning, everyone in Europe, and good afternoon in China and wherever you are in Asia. Thanks for joining us today. Again, maybe for many of you. Just a quick introduction. My name is Laure de Carayon. I'm the founder of China Connect, which is a platform connecting Western marketers with China's digital ecosystem. We do it since 2011 in Paris and Shanghai, and we help actually them make a presence on the Chinese web and connect with the Chinese globally. A quick introduction as well for this China Connect ReStart live series. Why do we do it? In fact, APAC becoming the #1 worldwide economic regions in 2020, China was the first hit from the COVID-19 and is the first country to start to recover. So all in all, we really felt all the more necessary, to share what experts on the ground can tell us about their experiences, their plans for the future, and which can be extremely inspiring and useful for all of us, wherever we are, and mostly in the West. So why this topic, capturing China's revenge travel opportunities? It's not something that everybody will agree on, and I think we don't need that much introduction regarding what's going on, given that the travel and tourism industry is totally on hold. So I will really give the floor to our guests today. 3 fantastic guests that I'm going to start to introduce. First, Mark WONG, who is Senior Vice President Asia Pacific at Small Luxury Hotels of the World, representing over 520 hotels in more than 90 countries, including actually 19 in Greater China. He spent 25 years in the travel industry, splitting his time in between Asia and the US. And beyond his job, Mark told me that he loves cooking and entertain at home and is passionate about interior decoration. Mark, welcome today. Hello. Anita Mendiratta is the president of her own company, Anita Mendiratta and Associates, a London-based international consulting firm that she's championed over the last 18 years, working closely with leaders in governments, businesses, and international organizations across the tourism, aviation, and development sectors, intensely of late during COVID-19. Importantly, Anita is the special advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations World Travel Organization and lead consultant at CNN Tourism Advisory Unit Task. Anita, welcome.
Thank you.
And now Edward Bell is responsible for the development of brand strategy, consumer insights, loyalty marketing, and marketing communication for the CATHAY Pacific Group globally. Ed has spent the majority of his career in marketing strategy and execution across Asia and Greater China, and is the recipient of the prestigious IPA and JChat Awards for marketing, and is a regular author and speaker. Thanks for being a speaker with us, Edward, today. Welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Just a quick intro, a quick information. All of you might want to grab the opportunity to interact with our guest today. So don't forget, to go to the Q&A section, below your screen, and type your question there. We will answer them actually at the end of our conversation today. So we're starting now. We're starting now with you, Anita. Quick introduction, very easily. What are the top learnings of this crisis for everybody, every organization dealing with Chinese tourism and travel today?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And ni hao. And I must say, Laure, thank you to China Connect for doing this session. This is incredibly important. And thank you to CNN for putting me here. I also extend greetings from my Secretary General of the UNWTO. So you mentioned a really important point, and I want to dive into this quite quickly. What are the opportunities? I think first and foremost, we need to put this in context. And if we go to the next slide, we talk about where exactly are we in the situation, as we say. As you said, the world has stopped traveling. But more importantly, this is a health crisis globally that has caused a financial and a travel and tourism crisis. It wasn't travel and tourism on its own. So we always need to keep that in context. On the next slide, if we go into it, and we look at where in the world are we in terms of the situation with our industry. From a UNWTO perspective, best case scenario, we're looking at a 58% downturn this year in international travel. Worst case, 78%. I'm not going to take a lot of time on this because everyone will get the slides, but we know that there are travel restrictions of some sort around 100% of destinations. 1 million jobs a day are being lost. 1 million lives are being uprooted lifestyle-wise. And we also know that we have guidelines to restart. Restarting, why were the guidelines put in place? Because the economic challenges that are being faced right now are starting to eclipse the healthcare concerns. So the UNWTO and the WHO work together to say, if you're going to open your doors, please be cautious on doing them in this way. Because the fact remains that with the easing of lockdowns, we still don't know about the life cycle of the virus. We still don't have a cure, and we don't have a rollout schedule for vaccination. So until that happens, we're all needing to manage compliance of protocols, watching for a vaccine being developed, and then hoping we can open up our doors, borders, and skies again. And I'll leave Edward to do the honors later about how we open up the skies. But if we look at the next slide, importantly, what we do know is that nothing is going to happen in terms of global travel, global retail, global anything, unless we manage the risk of the pandemic, because we don't want a second wave putting us into an even worse situation. There need to be policies in place between governments to open up borders and skies. We need the protocols not only to be applied, but also respected, including by travelers. And we need to know why people are traveling. So that takes us to our next slide, which is about how do we see travel opening up? And this is what's really important. We know it's going to be domestic travel first. Everyone has heard this. Why is this so important? A few reasons. Firstly, people in their countries understand their country's protocols and policies more so than if they cross borders and have to come in and might be, as for instance in the UK, if you fly back into the UK, you're quarantined for 2 more weeks. So people want to understand and have clarity around what are the implications. But what I think is even more important is, firstly, why are we traveling? The world has been locked in and locked down for over 100 days. It's not just about holidays. People are missing each other. As much as it is lovely, Laura, to see you on the Zoom call, I'd love to be able to meet you and to be able to spend that time. So the human connection of the heart is going to eclipse the holidaying in the immediate term. And also, any smart government is encouraging domestic travel. Why? Because when you open up domestic travel, you open up the supply and value chains. That's the way to get the domestic economy working. So ultimately, it's calling on patriotism for all of us to travel at home to rebuild our domestic economies, which then takes us to what do we know in terms of China? And this is where it becomes interesting, because based on that principle of people staying at home but needing to get out, what we see on the next slide is that China, with its opening up exactly as you said, it was one of the first countries to fall victim of COVID-19, and everyone around the world has become a victim of it. It is also one of the first from a virus life cycle perspective to see the opportunity to ease up. We know that the country has suffered $1.4 billion a day in losses of travel and tourism because of, again, not just the travel industry, but the supply chains that are mobilized by it. Domestic travel is expected to grow to 60% this year compared to 47% last year. That's fantastic because it means that ultimately the Chinese people are going to be building their own homes. We know that restrictions were eased on domestic travel back in April. Business travel, bilaterals are being discussed between countries to make sure that essential business people can connect. So if I want to go and see Mark, my government needs to make sure that we can have that opportunity to share borders and skies. And we also know, very critically, that a resumption of 30% of domestic air travel has occurred in April in China. All of this is experimental to see how do we slowly grow the industry without growing the risk of the pandemic. Labor Day saw 90 million people traveling domestically, and we know that Junar and Trip are already resuming travel bookings. So with this image, as you can see, Shanghai Disney has now opened up. Sadly, you can't see the sweet little girl smile because of the protocols, but the opportunity for the mental health challenges of COVID-19 to be relieved by opening doors again has been absolutely paramount. This is really important. I do want to add in, though, admittedly, I'm a real fan of words. Words matter. And I struggle with words like revenge travel, only because it's actually people, it's not a revenge on something or someone. It's actually against the quarantining of the virus. This is actually about people traveling because of excessive desire. This is indulgence travel. This is indulgence luxury because people feel the need to treat themselves again. So there's no revenge. It's an interesting term, and I suspect it was because of translation. It's an interesting term, but it's not a dark term. It's a blessing because it's going to be a reflection of the huge desire of the world to get back out again and be able to hug and not send a hug app. So back to you, Laura.
Yes! I guess you have a new friend as well with Edward. And I want, the voice is for you today, not mine, but definitely, I mean, it was not a clickbait title at all, actually. And of course, we've heard about, revenge shopping, that was crazy. So I was not the only one. Even McKinsey actually chose to pick someone who mentioned it in a report. So I said, oh, that's nice. But
it was successful provocation, so full credit to you.
You know what marketing is. So fantastic. Edward, up to you. So please don't kill me a second time. So, CATHAY Pacific.
I wouldn't do that. Yes, well, thank you very much. I mean, I think Anita's...
I'm going to ask you the question, Edward.
Oh, yes.
Pacific,
please.
Probably at its most challenging year in decades since the protest, 1 year. And at last, lots of Chinese are eager to travel again. What does the travel landscape look like in the APAC region? So we know a little bit. And how does it translate for CATHAY to seize not the revenge travel opportunity, but how you will reconnect with the Chinese? Up to you.
I'm very happy to talk about this topic. And I love the way that Anita set up that conversation. I only take objection to the point where she was recommending travel at home. Is that what she said? I mean, this whole thing of revenge travel is very interesting because, I mean, I guess you can see some sense of that topic because people are angry that their life has been taken from them. And let's face it, we all have some semblance of travel as part of our lifestyles these days. It used to be for the well-to-do, the very wealthy, but ordinary people now travel, very frequently. So I think people are rightfully a little annoyed that they've had things taken from them. But rather than that angry word, I do agree. For me, I think the closer emotion is about reconnection travel. That you had a life where you were connected to the place where you grew up, the place you live, and the world around you, and the cords have been cut. Now we need to connect them again and reconnect people again. So I think that's the thing. I'm very happy to talk about China. I lived in China for 15 years. My 3 children are all made in China. So, and I've only recently returned to Hong Kong. So yeah, 我太喜欢中国. So let me talk about it. So next slide, please. For us at CATHAY and for everyone in the airline business, this is a huge deal. CATHAY is in the news yesterday. Of course, there's a refinancing package that's come through, which we're very grateful to receive. And you wouldn't believe it, but in a normal day, we would transport 100,000 people. We're the world's 9th largest airline. In a normal day, we would transport 100,000 people. These last few weeks, we've been helping about 500 people a day to get where they want to go. So you can see just how such a huge impact this whole thing has had on us. So it's a huge deal. So we're very encouraged to look at China. China's a huge part of our business. For people who don't know CATHAY Pacific, CATHAY is an old-fashioned word for China. and actually Cathay Pacific started its life flying goods and services into China in the 40s. So our origin story, our birth, our company leaders, you know, it's a you know, fundamentally a very Chinese company. So we're very much linked to what's happening in China. So we're very pleased to see on this chart that we do see a rebound underway. And that's wonderful. And the rebound is happening from China because China did go into this first. They're coming out of it first. And of course, I think for very, you know, and China has dealt with it so swiftly, it affords Chinese consumers, I think they've been damaged less by the lockdown. You know, the period of time has been shorter. So they're actually, arguably, they have a greater ability to pay and to spring out, you know, back to the world. China and then to the world well, with their travel, which is fantastic. So we're very excited about this. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So this chart here is just what I was talking about. So, of course, you know, for all consumer markets, when we come to marketing, we talk about two things, right? The ability to pay. So are we targeting the people who have the ability to pay for what we have to sell? I'll talk a little about that later. But do we have the willingness to pay? And I think this second thing is what all the airlines, and I'm sure Mark at the hotel group is also thinking about this. Who around the world is willing to travel? Who has the willingness to pay for this sector? And again, here we can see that China is out in front of other markets with a greater willingness to pay for travel in the coming 6 months. So it's about 1 in 5 people say that they are, you know, somewhat willing to travel or very much, you know, more than usual, more than the previous period, willing to travel. So very excited about that. And that's, you know, one takeaway that we have. And so we're using this as an indication for us that we need to start engaging with the China customer, you know, before other markets for travel. Next slide, please. And in terms of how that, in terms of understanding how that travel opportunity will come about, there's 3 things I just wanted to share with everybody here. The first thing is about the timing. So what we can see from the China traveler is that it's actually spread out as it, you know, as you would expect, a little bit over various periods of time from July and August right through to the end of the year. But what's interesting is you're seeing the normal pattern, the normal swell for the national holiday period, and then October, you know, through to the end of the year. This is a normal kind of increase in the traveling volume from people in China. You know, a lot of people travel October and November and then into December. So we're seeing that this is also the case. So that gives us some indication about when people are coming. And if you click that button one more time, we'll get another angle on this story. Next slide. Yeah, so here we go. And what we can see is that what are those destinations that they're wanting to travel to? Now, so what we're seeing is, as Anita was saying, is that understandably, I think, you know, most of the China consumer is thinking about traveling within China. And of course, you know, for people in China, there's so many amazing places to travel to within China, and Europe and America and perhaps Australia also has this, and India perhaps also has this capability to offer so much choice. But what we can see is that it's people who really, you know, about 20% there want to travel, you know, less than 3 hours traveling time. But we can also see that there's a large number, about 3 out of every 10, who are happy to travel with what's called more than 3 hours, but still within domestic China. So that means Hong Kong, and that would also mean Macau, and that would also mean Taiwan as well. I think in terms of the early thinking and this kind of, they're calling it the green bubble. So this is kind of quite interesting, and the other markets are coming later. Okay, next slide. And what we can see here in terms of what people are looking for is that they're actually looking for many, many different things. So they're looking for outdoor scenic, they're looking for food, they're looking for families and kids, cultural and historical, beaches, health and wellness. So this very much, I think, represents the kind of the new appetite for China travelers and travelers in many places around the world. People are looking for many broad number of things, and thankfully Hong Kong has those top 6 things in a very large number, which is great. Next slide. Moving right along. So our strategy, our takeaway from this situation is that we need to focus on 3 things. We need to think about who to target because, of course, we've been severely impacted, by the situation, as I said, and our marketing funds have been depleted. So we need to focus on the right customer. Secondly, we need to build up in terms of our safety and reassurance to let people know they're going to be very safe when traveling with us. And then we need to think about what we can do to really reignite and revive that travel passion that we talk about. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about just one little detail here. And then what we're thinking of doing in terms of target markets and kind of how we can position to them, we're thinking of focusing on young urbanite travelers. These are the people who have the high willingness to pay, but they're also, young people tend to be more early adopters. So we think that they're the ones that we should focus on, and we aim to sell them on all the fantastic experiences that Hong Kong has to offer, the scaled up experiences, the neon lights, the beautiful architecture, the hiking and all those kinds of things. But there's another thing as well, and we're also talking about those frequent travelers. And these are the people who travel very often through Hong Kong to the world. And this is where Hong Kong acts as a fantastic gateway to the world for the travelers of China. So that's it. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks very much, Edward. Thank you. Mark, what did this crisis and its aftermath change and is changing actually in how you connect at small luxury hotels with your customers and fans? In fact, first, how did you communicate during this crisis, and what were the key findings, and responses from your customers, and how is it that you're going to move forward based on this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me today. Can you just start with the slides? I'll jump straight into a little bit of the overview on where we are in terms of the hotel industry that we have. Next slide, please. Just to share with you, also just to start off with some stats before I jump into where how we communicated with our customers. This is kind of the chart that we have seen from where the hotel occupancy from China sort of plummeted almost 90% once the epidemic, kind of pandemic now that hit the sort of the news in the lockdown. And over the next 14 weeks, you can start to see that the occupancy has started to come back. And interestingly enough, that the US and the Europe market are kind of following the same pattern. So that's like at the end of the tunnel, as we say, in terms of the hotel industry. But also, I think Anita has already mentioned a little bit, next slide please, that the way that we are seeing the recovery of the hotel industry has a lot of factors. We were hoping a much sharper V recovery when people can start to come back once the lockdown closes. But actually now it's because of all the restrictions and the changes in the way that we operate from a business standpoint, that we are all doing webinars and not doing face-to-face meetings. All these factors are also impacting the sort of recovery. So that's why we're starting to see a much slower recovery, and looking at a much not so such a steep recovery slope. Next slide, please. So from a hotel industry, from a China occupancy standpoint, and I was already looked at a little bit on stats on when people have started to travel. And we touched on a couple of things, that there were 3 milestones in terms of the recovery part. I mean, one was when they started to lock down, that's where we sort of, everything fell apart. But then also when the things started to stabilize, we started to see people starting to look for travel inspiration and start to look for ideas of where to go. And then the next one, of course, the next milestone is when they started to relax the lockdown. I think it was around April 8th, where people started to be able to travel domestically. And you start to see now that we are starting to see much more activity from the hotel occupancy level. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what we have done actually from our standpoint on trying to keep the customer in top of mind in terms of the brand, because people are not traveling, we also want to make sure that people don't forget us over the lockdown period, was to map the sort of our social media strategy, which is kind of the way you kind of have the speedy sort of communication, and the preferred method now in China is through social media rather than the more traditional way of advertising or email marketing, where you don't have the speedy of timing and also the messaging. So what we have done is we have tapped onto our social media channels. Next slide, please. And basically mapped onto the timing on where I showed you earlier, where the recovery of the hotel situation is. So in the very first stage where things are just kind of broken and all hell broke loose during that time, we had to be very sensitive in terms of the consumer sentiments. And instead of pushing things like promotion and where to stay or beautiful pictures, we kept it very solemn and make sure that everyone was sort of, to reassure our guests and our fans, and to make sure that, we are well taking care of people who have got reservations with us, to make sure that we are assisting them with further reservation. And also if there's also cancellation, we have very flexible cancellation policies to help them along the way. This the way actually is one of the things that came out of this, is also to start to build a goodwill with the fans, to make sure that we handle this situation properly, that eventually there will be some sort of goodwill coming back, that people will remember us the next time they think about travel. Next slide, please. At the same time, we know that during the lockdown period, people are really, trying to find things to do at home. So one of the things that we also need to do, and a lot of people are surfing online, is to provide a sort of home entertainment. So even though you can't travel, we want to make sure that you're still actually having this sort of travel experience at home. So we actually posted a lot of recipes from our restaurants, hotel restaurants, and people can start to maybe take some advice from the hotels and maybe cook a meal at home and sort of imagine that they're actually traveling. So next slide, please. So along the way also, as things became more stable, we want to make sure that we still continue to keep that communication. And I think that's very important, is to make sure that the interaction is not lost because of the pandemic, to make sure that there's always constant communication. And that's also where we also started to do more storytelling, that we are also invited people like the KOLs, the key influencers, to get online to talk to our hotels and also give a sort of commentary and create videos. So again, it's more on the entertainment part of it that we are starting to engage more fans over the time, and also get people involved with the brand when even they're not traveling. So in the next slide, you can see that we actually also taking it from the next step to inspire people when they're at home. What can they do when they're not traveling? Maybe decorate your home like a hotel room, or maybe, again, dressing up your dining table like you're dining in a restaurant, or download a playlist from the hotel. So again, all these touch points, we didn't want to make sure that everyone is still in touch with us, even though they are not traveling. So when we hit the next stage, which is the next slide, where things are started to look a bit more, sort of died down in terms of the hit the peak of the pandemic, is people are starting to look for inspiration. And that's where we kind of release our travel trends to give people ideas and start to build up their confidence to travel again. I think we touched on earlier, this is how to get people back thinking about travel rather than, afraid of travel, and because of all the safety issues or whatever issues it is, to make them feel comfortable again. So also on the next slide, you can see what we have done is we have also started to recognize from a CRS standpoint to build goodwill with the community. And this has gotten a lot of interest when we launched this, which is SLH for Heroes campaign, is recognizing the frontline people as well. So we have offered in this campaign, given out 1,000 room nights to 500 people in the front line to reward them and thank them for their service in terms of handling the service. So again, it's not always about, driving reservations or driving people to stay with us, but also involving ourselves with the community. So we launched this in the first week. We have already got over 1,000 nominations, and they're still coming in. So we will be announcing those 500 heroes and rewarding them with a free stay, a 2-night free stay at any of our hotels. Next slide, please. So now that we are now in the recovery period where people are starting to book, where we have seen bookings coming through the Qingming Festival, during the May 1st Festival, domestically they're starting to travel. So we're starting to engage back and welcome back our guests as well. So to do that, we've been doing a lot of streaming. Live streaming is one of the ways that has been very effective in terms of communicating with the consumers. So we just did one last weekend. That's the GM from the Hotel eClub Beijing. So we did a live streaming video just to give them the sort of, face-to-face sort of welcome rather than to send them an email or something that's more passive. So again, the human interaction as much as possible through technology, and we want to get people engaging and inspiring to travel again. So on the next slide, you can see that what we have done also is to, of course, with welcome back, we also want to do the technical part of it, is to start rolling up promotions from our hotels and starting to promote our China destinations. On the next slide, we also been participating on a lot of the social media channels that you can see that a lot of people are launching things like where to travel next, see the world again. Of course, Weibo has the revenge travel thing that's got 6 million views. So again, a lot of the social media people are starting to activate people's inspiration right now. So we have done, and on the next slide, you can see that we also did a Thinking of You campaign where we also started to do that. So again, the constant reminder, constant communication was very important throughout this whole crisis period, so that people one is with the sort of staying at home, they're surfing, they're looking for stuff, that they don't forget us. 2 is also to almost give them a much softer sort of a reminder and sell that, we also provide entertainment if they're not traveling. So that part of it also helped us in terms of engaging people. When we need them to come back, they will think of us. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks very much, Mark. I think it's very insightful and probably very useful for the audience to see these activation campaigns. Thanks a lot. Just want to take the opportunity where it's the moment also for all of you in the audience to prepare your questions. Once we have finished with the conversation here, so don't forget to write it in the Q&A section. Back now to you, Edward. Actually, so one of the post-COVID-19 trends is that Millennials and Gen Z, again, is becoming the largest, the biggest travelers category. So what are the content and the channels that you use to engage with this rising consumer target, and how do you build loyalty? I mean, actually, Mark has given us more than a hint of it. So on your side, what does it look like? Maybe also above the traditional, I would say, channel, if any. Yeah.
Certainly, yes. I can talk. I can talk a lot about that, but I won't talk too long. Look, I think. Yeah, look, there's a lot for millennials, for Gen Z. I mean, the big topic right now for aviation is, of course, sustainability, environmental sustainability. So we have done a lot in this space. But right now, the sustainability I'm concerned about is our own sustainability, the sustainability of our business. So we have focused a lot on helping people to feel comfortable traveling with us, and then later on inspiring. So I can certainly explain it to you. So this image here, for example, building on what Mark said, is trying to reach our audience in a more social media manner. So we, I think CATHAY in the previous years is perhaps a little more formal as a brand. Our communication tonality, you might say, was slightly, of an older gentleman. But we are now, I think, really very much adopting more like meme, creating more memes, creating more social media content. It's often more lighter. So obviously our planes don't literally have a face mask on them, in case anyone thinks that that's what's happening, but it's just something that we use to set the theme. So, you know, this is a section. So if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done. So if you click, yeah, so we have done, actually this is just a sample here of some of the things that Mark was also talking about. If you just go onto our Facebook page, or in China onto Weibo, if you go, sorry, go back one. So there's actually many different things in here. It's almost like a nest of different messages. So we've had, you know, we actually don't put our CEO on the air much to talk directly to customers. We know that Western brands did this a lot, in my opinion, too much. It lost its meaning. But I think when we did it, it was quite a big deal, and we had a huge number of people tuning in China and around the world. To Ron Lam, it's at the top there. And we've also been talking about the 10 things that our 10 hygiene initiatives to help people feel safe and reassured. But we've also, as Mark was saying, what we've done is we've been talking about how our cargo teams are actually, as we have done in the beginning of Cathay Pacific, we're actually we're the second largest cargo brand in the world. We've been actually one of the main cargo operators shifting face masks around the world, food parcels, PPE equipment. So we've been also building up this, if you like, the social license to operate, to build the community support for all of the ways in which we're helping people. So we just want people to understand that not only are we doing new things to help keep them safe, but we've been busy helping us all to kind of cope with all of this. So that's on the reassure side. And if you click the next part. But as Mark said, you know, travel is fun, and travel needs to touch you in the heart. And we had a point of view that actually a lot of what the brands were doing, it was too heavy, it was boring, and it was very repetitive. So what we wanted to do when people were still were in lockdown is we aimed to just reconnect with them and just remind them about the joy of travel. And so what we did, a very humble little campaign, it was shot on an iPhone by people who were in their homes, and then we edited it together. So if you click to the next page, I think we can play a little video. And this was a social media campaign that we ran all around the world and in China on Weibo.
Excellent.
Yeah, so you know, that worked really well for us. People really loved it. It worked really well in China too, even though it was just Chinese in subtitles in this particular execution. But it's really just that relaxed, more, we're all in the same kind of boat, but reminding people about what travel is. But then at the same time, what we can see as we get closer to activating audiences, if you go to the next slide, what we can see is actually that now that it's getting more practical for people wanting to travel, they're now asking more practical questions around how are we going to safeguard people's hygiene and minimize the risk of infection. So if you click it one more time. So what we've done is that we've built a second wave of communications aimed at those early adopter travelers to tell them all the ways which we're going to take care of them in addition to what we've done already. And this comprises things that we are doing in the plane, but also things that we're doing at the airport through the Hong Kong Airport Authority. For example, where we have new technology where it just scans your face once, and then you don't have to have any physical contact with anyone, with any card or anything. It just scans your face throughout various checkpoints as you go through. So that's also minimizing infection risk, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you click on one more slide. So we've just launched this a couple of days ago, and this is our second wave of reassurance communication, which is part of the way which we want to tell people it's safe. And a funny little fact for everybody, that despite the fact that we're now at 6 million cases around the world, there's not one confirmed case of anyone being infected in an airline anywhere in the world. And what we're doing is explaining to people, contrary to people's intuition, that you're in an enclosed space. Actually, because the air filtration technology in airplanes is so amazing, and it goes vertically, as our graphic shows, you're actually in a vertical air corridor. You're not in a horizontal tube recycling the air backward and forward, which is what people think. So we're working very hard to bring the facts to combat the fear of travel and to help reassure people that it's fine to travel. So this has gone out, and we're going to be doing more and more over the coming weeks, because this thing's not going to go away, and the recovery is going to ramp up slowly, as Mark's chart also showed. And we believe we need to keep kind of reminding people and reinforcing these key points. So if you just click one more time, the last point is really about connecting, you know, channels and assets and with property. So in terms of kind of reigniting and reviving the China traveler, what we're doing is that we're talking to them in the channels in which they are. So we do a lot with Edtech, which is in the top right-hand corner there. That's a very popular social media platform in China. In Baidu, we're on the Baidu brand zone, which is where one of the first brands to be back there as well, helping to re-inspire travel. Sina Weibo, of course, you know, I just talked how we put our campaign there that I just showed you, but also we're very active on Weixin, which is of course very important. But we've also got brand level communication on the Gaotie, on the high-speed train in China. So we're using these channels in addition to other channels. But on the right-hand side, what we're doing is we're linking those things with a whole series of partners. And we don't believe that it's smart, or will it be that effective for us to try and do everything on our own. So we're working very in a collaborative manner, a collaborative commerce way, if you like, with Disneyland, with Hong Kong Tourism Board, with the Airport Authority, with hotel groups, to work together to bring those China customers back into Hong Kong. And part of the way in which we're going to do that is we're going to repackage some of the things that Hong Kong already has and is already famous for. So we're talking about things like the Rugby Sevens. We're talking about the Wine and Dine event. Hong Kong, of course, has more Michelin-starred restaurants than any city in the world, including Paris, Laura.
And New York, really?
Yes,
okay.
C'est vrai. It's true.
Oh, I believe.
And also the Hong Kong Countdown, the Lights Festival. So there's so many things that we have, but we just need, as I said at the start, we need to reconnect these things. The reasons to come, the properties and the partners that help you to get there, and then the right channels in China. But we need to do it in a fun way. We need to inspire people. Everyone travels for a reason. So it's about bringing that reason to people in an entertaining way. And then we think we're going to get there. So back to you one more time.
Thanks very much. I wish I fly soon to Hong Kong again. Thanks. Mark, no, Anita, sorry, Anita. Topic that actually that was raised just a minute ago by Edward, sustainability. So there's a growing consciousness of the world and the Chinese, including the young generation, because we are always asked, you know, do the young Chinese care about sustainability and environment? Yes, they do. So this growing consciousness in general, and travel is no exception. So what are the challenges and opportunities, you know, to face this context actually, and also in the digital world?
Stunning, thank you. I must say, I love sessions like this, Laura, because listening to Edward's presentation, listening to Mark's presentation, the alignment of thinking is quite remarkable. And we didn't see each other's presentations. And I wanted to go through this then very quickly as a result, because as Mark and Edward have said, and we all know, that this time of lockdown has allowed travel to become an escape vehicle. It's allowed people to physically get out and break some of the psychological and physical claustrophobia and the emotional claustrophobia by exploring. And that's allowed destinations to become, and airlines and hotels to become pause partners. I love the fact that Mark is using his loves of decor, of cuisine and gastronomy as a way of connecting to the hotel, its travelers around the world. And Edward as well, he mentioned something really important that I think we often forget. There are 16,000 aircraft around the world that are grounded, but there are a number of them that are essential that are still flying. Because if it wasn't for the aviation sector, airlines like Cathay Pacific literally transferring essential medical aid and essential medical practitioners, our world would be in a very different position right now. So aviation and travel and tourism has demonstrated through this crisis why it is so valuable and why we actually can't live without it. And that links to the fact that the value of travel has changed as well as the values of travel, which means there is no going back. And as my Secretary General says, sustainability is now part of the DNA of rebuilding the travel sector. Because exactly as Edward said, before we used to look at sustainability optionally, and it used to be about green. Now it's economic sustainability, social sustainability, cultural sustainability, environmental sustainability, and spiritual sustainability. Because what is the option? Bankruptcy, extinction, global damage. And so that's why this time has caused by osmosis this change, which is why it's been so important to keep the dreaming alive. And the UNWTO created a campaign about 100 days ago, which was all about that, and recognizing people need to escape, they need to keep dreaming, and we need travel and tourism and aviation to be flying again. We need it to grow again because our global economy needs it. It's not blue skies versus aviation. It's not blue skies and environments versus travel and tourism. It's with. And aviation is not the problem when it comes to dark skies, it's emissions. And as Edward said, the aviation industry, whether it's through ICAO, IATA, all the airlines are spending millions in advance of this to deal with the emissions issue. So credit where it's due. But the UNWTO to create a campaign that a number of countries are now using around the world, and that CNN has recently amplified in stay home today, keep safe, keep healthy, but keep dreaming about traveling tomorrow. Because as Mark said, everyone needs to keep hanging on. We cannot give up hope because our world needs to reconnect. Because we're human beings. The huggability matters as much as we can send the apps of the hugs and the emojis of the kisses. We all need each other and our world needs our sector, which takes us to our next slide.
Tomorrow sounds good. With its new words, hot tips and best kept secrets, like local beats, touring bands and classic tunes. It's the cheer of birdsong, crashing waves and sleepless cities.
Tomorrow looks good. With familiar faces, colorful characters, and deep blue seas. Like nothing you imagined, everything you dreamed, bright as a canopy of stars.
It's your first flight, first night in town, and setting off at first light.
Tomorrow feels good with best laid plans, the best in town, and the best you've ever had.
Like sealed deals, bucket lists, and being there when it counts.
It's the home away from home.
The thrill of the unknown.
In it together
or alone. Tomorrow isn't a world away.
Stay home for now.
Dream forever.
And that message is really important because we all need this industry to continue. We'll start in different phases, so there is no new normal, it's the next normal, and then the next normal. It's exactly as Edward said, we have the protocols now in place, but once we understand the virus, those protocols will shift as to what they need to be. But that confidence in travel is not just about safety, it's about care. And exactly as Edward said, it's about not just wellness, it's about well-being. The hardware is no longer the only thing that's important. The software, the care that's demonstrated is critical, which takes us to my last slide.
Tomorrow.
Ultimately, what does this mean in terms of communication, especially in the digital space? This is not a time for campaigning. Exactly what Mark said. This is about communicating. This is when brand needs to use the digital platforms for those 360-degree conversations, taking unique insights, as has been done with exactly what Mark did and what Edward did, in showing what really matters. To show the CATHAY Pacific aircraft with the face mask on, that's beautiful, because it's saying that we care for us as much as we care for you. That's really important. An invitation to come back needs to be genuine, and doing it in a way that allows people to recognize we've all gone through this difficult time. We, whether we're cabin attendants, in the hotels, consultants, whoever we are, we've missed you. And keeping that invitation there, because when the conversations carry on during these times of lockdown, people never forget who their friends are, and they never forget who stood by them. So for Mark and Edward to speak as they have about building the relationship, so when our doors and skies open, people will remember CATHAY stood by them and kept them dreaming. People remember that, as Mark said, those hotels taught them how to keep cooking and doing these little tricks with their rooms. I was only concerned, Mark, about the whole turning your room into a hotel room, because I think there are a lot of people that didn't make their bed that day and were waiting to come back and have the bed made and everything turned down. But we're in an interesting time. This is a global humanitarian crisis before it's an economic crisis. That's now the opportunity going forward. So with that, Shishia, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. Well, you have amazing advocates, huh, Edward and Mark. Have you been a pilot in a previous life, Anita? Or
I love aviation. I have to admit, I love aviation.
Now, there's a challenge. Mark, this is yours. You've got 5 minutes to close with an amazing thing. It's well enough, and the transition is perfect with Anita. Niche is the new luxury as well. So how does SLH, sorry to spell it like this, small luxury hotels of the world, intend to leverage this positive trend, actually, as the Chinese are making travel plans and bookings, first domestically, then in APAC for the next coming weeks and months? So really 5 minutes.
Sure, I'll go just quickly. Slides, please. Yeah, so next slide, please. So I'll skip through the definition. I think we've beaten this horse pretty dead. But pretty much, I mean, with the pent-up demand to travel and to spend, the next slide, please. What I found with an interesting survey from Fliggy recently, that travel is part of this revenge spending. So that's good news for all of us. And it's very encouraging that people are starting to think of travel as part of the next step of where they want to go. And that takes us to the next slide. Just to give you an overview on where we are right now, where we operate in the luxury space, you see that our growth in terms of occupancy is still gradual, but the mid-scale and the ones and the economy hotels are the ones that are growing much more faster. So we're still hopeful that people will start to spend a little bit more in our category. But that's where I think the trend was to see where and when they spent it on. Next slide, please. And with this sort of, we see also people we touched on this domestic destination. Next slide. And you can see the spikes also during the holiday season, and as well as the flight as well. So you can see that the travel patterns are very mirroring the timing of the year and occasion of travel. So people are not just rushing out the door and getting onto the next flight or the next holiday, but they are also looking at the sort of timing on when they are traveling next. Next slide, please. And looking at some of the consumer sentiments, again, this is looking at all the key dates, October, where there's the National Day or this New Year. So again, coinciding with holidays, that people are tending to travel. And of course, it's encouraging for us in the travel industry to see people are not waiting till next year, that people are starting to look at the summer months and also October to start to travel at the earliest. Next slide, please. And I think also it's interesting to see also the type of travel, and people are starting to think of different purpose of travel. This time around, people are looking for more nature, looking for more relaxation, looking for places that are more remote, and also self-drive. Sorry, Edward, it's in the domestic market, I think people are still looking at a sort of driving rather than flying. It's the sort of the level of comfort that they're in their own environment. But I think what's interesting to see that there's a shift of people looking at much more of a wellness, well-being, relaxation type of travel. And I think it's a consequence of what we are experiencing right now, that we want to have some sort of relaxation away from this worrying times. Next slide, please. So where we stand in terms of small luxury hotels, and we feel that even though we are a small group and with small hotels, we can deliver very big on the travel experiences. And these are some of the things that we feel that we would cater to the new or the next normal, as Anita mentioned, next normal sort of criteria that people are looking for, that people are not looking for big congested cities, they're looking for more remote areas and more standalone type of villas and bungalows where they don't have to be exposed to so much of a mass crowded area. So I think we fit right into that niche of delivering those new criteria. And I'll show you some examples over the next couple of slides as where we are. Next slide, you'll see that we have seen a big spike in terms of the May 1st holidays, that we have seen almost 70% occupancy, in our remote areas like Henan and Yunnan, where these are more remote areas that people are moving away from the crowded cities and going to much more, I would say, more remote areas and secondary cities. In the next slide, you can see also that people are starting to go into, even though within the city itself of Hangzhou, for example, they're going to choose hotels that have a bit more closer to nature, as we have this our hotel in Hangzhou that's inside the CC Wetlands Park, or has got much more outdoor spaces where they don't have to be crowding, with the next door guests. So people are looking for different type of hotels, accommodations, even when they travel right now. On the next slide, we feel that we fit that role as well, as people trying to have the self-contained spaces and private spaces. Like this Hutong in Beijing, in the middle of Beijing, you can have a whole buyout of 4 rooms in the Hutong traditional courtyard and have the whole space to yourself and to your friend. You don't have to share those spaces, or have a private villa with a private pool. So again, all these, I think we have the product to fit all those new criteria of people of physical distancing themselves from the crowd. And on the next slide, what's interesting to see that we have actually very high occupancy right now at the Hotel Beijing, where the theme suites are very well received. People are not traveling overseas. They want to maybe get away and sort of imagine and romanticize themselves. The Swiss chalet or the Miami suites things people are looking for right now, even though they physically can't be in that destination, but they can be in the environment that they can sort of, have the same sort of experience themselves. So they are buying higher category of stuff, of room types, and having that experience even in their, in their own same city as vacations. Next slide, please. So I just want to touch on very quickly before I get into the last bit of it, is also the changes in terms of pre and post destinations. People are starting to look at destinations that are a bit more, they came out of this virus very quickly in terms of containing the virus, like Iceland and New Zealand. So those are things that people are looking for, and changes in terms of preferences as well. So again, I think that's something that we'll see over time. Once those international borders open, people will start to be booking those areas that they feel comfortable to travel. Next slide, please. Lastly, before I touch on what we're doing in terms of creating the safety that Edward has said on the airlines, on the hotel side, that's also one of the very main criteria that people are looking for in terms of are your hotels are being cleaned properly. I just want to stress this part. I think for airlines as well, we always have been cleaning our hotels and planes. It's just that now it's become a very important criteria or consideration when they travel. And in the past, it's just been taken for granted that they are clean, but now it's just very much a top of mind criteria. So with that, also, we are also educating our partners as well to make sure that this information is translated to the customer. So we will be rolling out in the next couple of weeks a partnership with GBAG, which is the global organization, to roll out guidelines to accreditate our hotels to make sure that we are up to a global standard of cleanliness. And also hotel we are encouraging our hotels to inform their guests through their WeChat channels or through their other channels to make sure that their guests are also informed of what's happening at the local level. So not always just within the hotel, but also local destination. What are areas that they should avoid to travel if there's a sort of a cluster of outbreak, or where is it safe to go or where it's not safe to go. So those are things that we will be putting together as a long-term strategy as well. And what's very important, like Edward mentioned, we have to touch on to the partners as well to make sure that our information is translated to people like travel advisors. I think they play a very important role for us right now in terms of communicating that information, because the information right now is so fluid, in terms of updating us, in terms of services, updates, safety, hygiene standards, and stuff like that. So in terms of building confidence, we need to build the confidence with our travel advisors, which are partners, and that most probably will then, we hope that that will be translated into the confidence built into their customers as well, which are the eventual travelers. And we are also using the live streaming, like what we're doing right now in all the webinars, because the travel agency are not seeing us as sales in the traditional sales call. We're using the internet and digital as a sort of virtual site inspection, virtual webinars to educate the travelers. So the digital space has definitely played an important role in communicating with consumers as well as with our travel partners. So that's what we have. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks very much, Mark. Well, a super dive. I dream of it. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to move immediately to the questions, and we're going to start with Anita, with thanking everybody. And the question is, who will be the travelers abroad in the first wave? So advanced tourism, who do you consider will be the first one to fly somewhere? Well, we focused a lot about the young generation, but who do you think these travelers will be indeed going out? So switching from domestic to overseas. Anyone who wants to answer? I mean, based on some surveys, we know that we're focused on domestic right now, but maybe the answer is a bit in the question as well. But
well, I'll jump in if I can. Whoops, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, Anita.
Well, I was going to say, wherever Edward says the aircraft will take us will be the first travelers that go. But I think from a motivation perspective, as I said earlier, it's very much heart before holiday. There have been a lot of people that have missed milestones, whether they're heart heavy or heart lightning. Families having missed babies, birthdays, passings. There's going to be a lot of reconnection of people who are driven by more than just a holiday. I do believe it's going to be less of the elderly, those traditional golden and silver travelers, only because of continued concerns around health. But I do believe the primary motivation is going to be heart versus holiday. But as I said up front, it all depends on where the airlines are able to start or restart traveling too.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Edouard, and Mark, do you have any idea, given Mark the global networks also that you have, any indications that confirm Anita's point? Or?
We have a data dashboard from several different sources. So from Ctrip, from Skyscanner, all these other places. So we're actually scanning this all the time, people's travel intent on it, and it's a live panel. But what we can see actually in data that's just come in just recently, in Hong Kong, we actually don't see a big correlation between age and travel intent. That's something that's just come in. Now that may be because in Hong Kong, like in Singapore or other cities, people travel all the time. As a normal life. So I think particularly people who are affluent, this is just such a normal thing. I don't think they're worried about it. But I think in larger countries where you have a big domestic market and you have the option and the habit of people traveling domestically, like in China, like in India, like in the US, in Europe, I think you will see younger people traveling first. In terms of the heart over the holiday, VFR will happen because I think, as Anita said, you know, people have put off, they've missed anniversaries and things like that. So that's definitely going to happen. But that's not something that we think that we can accelerate with marketing or the way that we do it. That's a foundation layer of demand that will just happen. What we can make a difference on is the younger person, those young affluents, or the Henrys, as we call them, high income, not rich yet people who actually travel for a lifestyle. This is their behavior, and they've put it off. So they're the ones that we want to get to come back. And that's they're the ones who we think will be traveling first amongst the VFR. And of course, the business people who, you know, they have customers to go and see, clients, things like that. But the VFR, the visiting friends and relatives in the business, they will travel when they have to. The young holiday makers, they need to be convinced, because perhaps, you know, they could go out and do more dinners or things like this. So we need to reconnect them with travel as something that they want to do. But our information is that they're actually very much ready to travel. Many of them really looking forward to traveling internationally, not just domestically.
Definitely. Well, this is definitely also my feeling. Well, actually, surprisingly, it's too bad, but I don't think we have other questions, because one of these was also, do you think that people are searching for destinations with more space and closer to nature? I think we've given that answer, and yes, indeed, yes. Vacation distancing, that's true for those kind of destination, of course. Well, you've been, it's funny, I mean, this consciousness that there is, and that everybody is, well, talking about right now, and of course that figures are showing until we can fly again. But, you know, this really new normal, do you think it's, you know, the famous, you know, word, the word tomorrow and everything is going to be different, and some people say, no, it's going to be the same word, but worse. I feel like the new generation, it's always a conflict, and there's always, you know, fighting with, yes, I would like to be more sustainable conscious, and some are already, but on the other end, I consume, I buy, I will travel again. I mean, and it's funny that this target audience is becoming, I mean, the biggest one. Indeed, the silver ones, the senior people are, you know, coming second now. But I mean, I feel like there's hope for a rapid burst in travel from this generation. I don't know, and probably a conflict with this consciousness. But that's my point. I mean, I feel like it's going to be a trend, a deep trend, but a slow trend. I don't really believe in something very quick. You think it's going to be really radical? Because the talks, the speeches, everything is super radical. But do behaviors will really follow that way? Do you think so?
You know, like you've hit something really important to, particularly the space I operate in, the UNWTO. Before this, we talked about over-tourism. We talked about flight shaming. All of these words and taglines were being incorrectly used. And the feeling was, yes, but our growth trajectory is going so fast. This is what's happening with travel. I have a right to travel. And that's what the world's general position was. But what has been very clear from this time is that we can now see, every single individual can see the impact of their lives on the world. And that's where innately I feel that we cannot waste this time to rethink how do we travel and why do we travel. But importantly, I think it's very clear now that I'd be surprised if we hear the words over-tourism for quite some time. Even when people talked about flight shaming, I used to get so provoked, because it's not the airlines, it's the emissions. Let's separate the problem from an essential carrier of people and goods around the world. People are seeing that now. And I think the beauty is that we have a chance to make sure we don't waste this time. And when we go back in the world, we are more conscious, because people now recognize at an individual level the impact they have. Over-tourism was a result of two things: bad management, but bad manners. Just because I have a passport, a cell phone, and an airline ticket doesn't mean I can walk into your home without knocking and taking off my shoes if that's the custom. Travel is not a right, it's a privilege. And that's where I think people are recognizing the value of it in their lives, and the change in values will, please God, change the way we interact with the world going forward as travelers.
So we will really need to go to Mars, because we're going to be more than 1 billion people in a couple of, not even 2 decades. There's going to be, I would like to believe you, but I understand your mission, Anita. I'm more pessimistic about this, but the talk is not about that. Well, thanks very much. I don't know if there's anything, Edward or Mark, that you would like maybe to conclude with, because we have no questions so far. I've seen, Edward, that you've answered one in the chat room.
I have one thing that I can add. I wanted to talk about. I think building on what Anita was just saying, I think what happens is when you talk about the problem, it makes the problem bigger. Mm-hmm. And I disagree with the so-called new normal, that the new normal means we're not going to travel. I think if you look back at history and human nature, the so-called experts always tend to accentuate the downside and the negative. It's in the human nature, we tend to pay more attention to loss aversion, to those things that we will lose. There's actually some interesting research which shows that people's values have not changed before and after COVID. Now, people's values are what drives us. They're the things that propel us forward, and they motivate our behavior. And a lot of people in the world now see ourselves as either global citizens or globally connected. I don't think people are going to want to give that up. And I think as the industry, we need to stop talking about the new normal being masks and all these kinds of things. These are reactions. This is, I believe, a coping set of strategies for a period of time. And then after that, there'll be better and more efficient ways to deal with this. I mean, people have had influenza, people are not walking around in masks. In the airlines, as I said, the HEPA filters actually remove the viruses from the air. Now, for the time being, we should wear masks. I'm not saying that. But I don't believe that this is the end of life as we know it. And I think the more that we talk about that, the more people believe it. What we should be doing, I think, is talk about the motivations that I think the other panelists have been talking about, why we do what we do. We want to connect with people. The power of touch, you get that from actually physically being somewhere, going and seeing your grandmother, going and seeing your boyfriend, girlfriend, going to a business meeting, shaking someone's hand. Those things are meaningful, and they can't be replaced or even grossly substituted by other technologies. So we need to talk it up. We need to inspire people to do it. And then just, if for a period of time we have to help people cope with some of their fears and anxieties when we do that, but let's not confuse coping with fundamental change. I don't see anything that's going to create fundamental change.
Great point.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I'd like to echo that. I mean, I think travel is part of, human enrichment in a sense.
You're great, but go ahead. Fantastic.
Yeah.
You look like, the fantastic Chinese artist Lo Bin, who has and I love him. So go ahead, keep on.
Sorry about that. It's just the lighting is not that great. Fantastic. Yeah, but I think I want to echo Edward's point. I mean, travel is something that you have to do it yourself at the destination. You can surf as much as possible online or do whatever you need to do at home. But the experience is very different when you're actually at the destination, at the hotel, on the flight, or wherever it is. So I think that cannot be replicated, by sitting behind a desk or behind a computer. So that's something that we want to make sure that that's still going to be an integral part of life moving forward.
Thanks very much to everybody. Anita, Mark, Edward, for your contributions, your time. Thanks for sharing, really. Thank you all who are still with us. Just want to say that we will send right away a link for a quick survey, because we'd like very much to have everyone's feedback on how they benefited from this hour that we spent together. The replay will be also available later today, tonight, depending on where you are. As for us for the series, as I mentioned, in the opening, we'll hopefully have another topic on travel retail in domestic China. This is to be confirmed. So in the meantime, you can connect with us, indeed, with China Connect, WeChat accounts or mine. And we hope to see you soon. Let's keep in touch. Again, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.